The story kicks off with Grand Duke Aces Fraser, a terrifying and majestic figure. A young pink-haired lady named Lydia Tulia is brought before him and told to pay her respects. Tulia addresses him as Grandpa while greeting him. Internally, she describes him as a man with hair as cold as ice and eyes as sharp as a ruthless beast. She realizes she's in a tight spot and must beg for her life. She announces her full name as Tulria Fraser and tells her grandfather she has something important to say. As she prepares to speak, she thinks she's ready to do anything to survive, even if it means living like a corpse. All she wants is to keep breathing, but unexpectedly, completely different words come out of her mouth. She screams at her grandfather, "Do you think living and eating well alone is enough?" She's shocked by her own words, wondering what on earth she just said. Suddenly, a system window pops up warning her that her reputation has dropped to a dangerous level. It tells her that the character penalty has been activated, making her only speak words that trigger maximum hostility from others. The Grand Duke gets furious, asking if she's mocking him. Tulia is terrified, realizing she's stuck in a nightmare difficulty level. Our heroine remembers how she got here. She was transported into a game world she had played for years. Worst of all, she reincarnated as the villainous Tulria Fraser, a character known for her rotten personality and constant bullying of the heroine, whose destiny is a bloody tragic end. She expresses her frustration at being stuck in this trash character. Her life as Tulria is miserable. She lives worse than beggars and eats stale bread. Then she remembers her past life as Han Yi, which wasn't any better. She suffered from her step-siblings, who tried to marry her off to strangers after her parents died, and her life ended in a car accident. She discovers that Tulria's original life was also tragic. Her mother ran away with another man and died, and her father, the Marquis, abandoned her and left for the borders without sending any money. She lived a life of neglect and loneliness, but she firmly decides she won't die again. While looking for a way to survive, another system window appears. Main quest activated. The window describes her as trash, broke, and hated, and sets her goal: reach rank A before the real person appears. Then her terrible stats show up. With an overall grade of F-, she realizes the real person refers to the game's heroine, Koriko. Her time is short, and the penalty for failure is death. Her mission is now clear: reach rank A and survive. She feels despair comparing her low grade to Koriko, who starts at rank C. She thinks the mission is impossible, but she gathers her resolve and decides to look for an assistant who can help. At that moment, her cousin Tedric bursts in. Tedric is from a side branch of the family and has always been jealous of Tulria for being the direct heir, constantly causing trouble for her. Tedric starts insulting her, mocking the smell of her place and her poverty, reminding her that her father abandoned her. He calls her pathetic, which enrages Tulia because he touched a nerve. Our heroine remembers that the reason the original Tulria became a villainess was because of people like Tedric. She grabs a fork and threatens him, remembering that the original Tulria stabbed him with one in the past. Tedric gets scared. She thinks about actually stabbing him, but stops, because it would negatively affect her character stat. She endures his insults as he continues to provoke her, calling her an illegitimate daughter. Just as she's about to lose it, Tedric's father, Viscount Lelius, appears. The Viscount looks very displeased and shouts at his son. Tedric tries to justify himself by claiming Tulria tried to stab him first. Viscount Lelius slaps his son, Tedric, and Tulia is surprised by her uncle's stance against his son. Lelius yells at his son, warning him that their grandfather, the Grand Duke, is coming, and all their lives are in danger if he hears what was said. He tells him the reason for the Duke's visit is the Fraser Banquet, a massive feast where all family members gather. Tulia wonders why the Duke is coming to her crumbling castle, especially since he's never visited before. Lelius suddenly changes his tone, smiling at Tulia and offering her a luxurious dress, asking her to wear it to the banquet because the Duke hates shabby appearances. Then he whispers that her father will pay for it later and suggests using her land deed as collateral to borrow money from him. Tulia immediately realizes he's a con artist. She remembers from the game that the original Tulria trusted him and borrowed a huge sum, leading her to drown in debt after Lelius and her father abandoned her. Tulria hoped her father would save her, but our heroine knows the bitter truth. Nobody cared about her. She realizes that if she accepts his offer, she'll head straight for the bankruptcy ending. She decides Lelius cannot be trusted, and that she should target the Grand Duke himself instead, as he's a much better ally. In the middle of her thoughts, it seems the Duke heard her earlier words about living alone. Tulia panics, fearing she made the wrong move. Her plan was to win the Duke's favor and beg for her life, but because of the character penalty, She screamed provocative words. She covers her mouth in shock, while the Grand Duke coldly asks if she was addressing him. She hears the system window again, warning her that the penalty will make her speak only what causes maximum hostility. She realizes her situation is worse than she imagined. She knows how to win the Duke's favor as Koriko, but the gap between her F rank and Koriko's C rank is huge. Suddenly, a red gauge appears over the Duke's head and starts filling up slowly until it's completely red. She fears this means death if it fills up, but she's determined to survive and achieve her dream of a simple, comfortable life. She discovers she first needs to get rid of the character penalty. The system tells her she can raise her stats using available coins, a feature that wasn't there when playing as Koriko. She decides to use all her 1,000 coins to raise her character stat, and she successfully cancels the penalty. She immediately falls to her knees and screams, "Grandpa!" Much to everyone's surprise, she starts crying, claiming her staff is starving due to the tiny budget, and swears she hasn't spent money on luxuries. Then she announces she'll give up marriage to get her dowry in advance and pay back her debts to her uncle, Lelius. Lelius rushes to cover her mouth, calling her a wicked child, spreading lies. He apologizes to his father, the Grand Duke, but the Duke suddenly orders him to leave her alone. The red anger gauge starts fading, and the Duke tells her to continue. Tulia seizes this once-in-a-lifetime chance, thanks him, and then begs him to lift her probation period. Dead silence fills the room. Then the Grand Duke calls for Lelius. He asks him why Tulia is still under probation 3 years after the sentence, and why she thinks it was indefinite. Tulia is stunned, wondering if Lelius's words were all lies. She remembers Tedric telling her the punishment was indefinite, when in reality it was only for 1 month. Lelius and his family had been deceiving her for 3 years. Lelius tries to dodge, claiming a misunderstanding, but the Duke reveals another lie. Lelius's wife told everyone Tulia insisted on living in this warehouse after her sentence ended. Lelius keeps denying it, then hypocritically asks Tulia who deceived her, promising to teach them a lesson. Tulia thinks to herself that Lelius is the real trash and decides she's going to expose him. Tulia pretends to be Leah, innocent, and repeats the insults Tedric threw at her, which infuriates the Grand Duke. The Duke screams at Tedric, condemning his words, while Tedric tries to escape by claiming it's a misunderstanding. Tulia smiles victoriously. She remembers the Fraser family gives a precious necklace to members upon their social debut, and Tedric was no exception. The Duke calls Tedric and approaches him quickly. The boy jumps in fear, but the Duke simply strips him of the Fraser family honor. Then he turns to Tulia and tells her she'll move to the family's main palace, leaving her in shock. After the Duke's visit, things change drastically. Lelius and Tedric vanish completely, and Tulia moves into the luxurious ducal palace. She's amazed by the size of the palace and the beauty of her new room, feeling she finally survived. She's greeted by Luke, the Duke's direct assistant, and Tulia is overjoyed by the Duke's generosity. Luke informs her the Duke sent her something. Tulia thinks it's a warning letter, but is shocked to find it's her monthly allowance. She's stunned to discover the amount is 1 billion. She double-checks with Luke, who confirms the amount and leaves. Tulia realizes she's rich. Suddenly, her wealth stats skyrocket, reaching 0. As a reward, she gets 1,000 extra coins, and her overall grade rises to F. She thinks about how to use the new coins, and decides not to focus on beauty, especially after failing to comb her own hair due to her disastrous skill stat. She refuses to spend her precious coins on raising skills, and decides to wait for a maid to help. Suddenly, she gains 2 extra coins, just for her failed attempt to comb her hair. She realizes the system rewards any effort she makes to improve herself, not just for looks. She decides to make homemade jam as a gift for the Duke, remembering from the game that he loves handmade gifts. Even though the jam looks terrible because of her poor skills, she knows the Duke won't eat it anyway. The goal is just to win him over. She realizes she needs help, but doesn't have a personal maid. Likely because of Lelius, who manages house affairs, she plans to distribute the jam around the palace to spread rumors and force Lelius to appoint a maid for her. She continues delivering jam daily through Luke, who notices the Duke doesn't usually care for gifts. Meanwhile, rumors spread among the servants about Tulia's messy hair and lack of a maid. Reaching Aubrey Fraser, Lelius's wife, Aubrey is furious at Tulia's audacity and orders one of her maids to teach her a lesson. Later, the maid serves dinner to Tulia, who is happy it finally arrived. While eating, she feels something strange in her mouth. She discovers she's chewing on a pebble. Tulia realizes the maid was following someone else's orders and thinks about how to handle it. At that moment, Aubrey, Lelius's wife, enters pretending to be shocked. She inspects the pebbles on Tulia's plate and calls it a bad joke. Tulia is sure Aubrey and her family orchestrated this and feels disgusted by their petty actions. Tulia decides to confront the maid, but Aubrey rushes in with her hand raised, making Tulia think she's about to be slapped. Unexpectedly, Aubrey pretends to be angry and slaps the maid instead. Tulia turns to Aubrey, wondering what's going on. Aubrey addresses the maid with fake rage, then asks Tulia what should be done with her. Tulia realizes Aubrey is trying to show her authority and has a hidden motive. Tulia decides to test her, telling her aunt she leaves the maid's punishment to her as the one in charge, but that she doesn't want to see any more violence in her room. Aubrey agrees and orders the guards to drag the maid to the cellar. Aubrey pretends to be sad about what happened, then offers to recommend a new maid for Tulia. Tulia sees right through Aubrey's plan. She sent a disposable maid just to create an excuse to plant a real spy by her side. Tulia thinks about how to reject the offer without raising suspicion. Aubrey calls in two candidates for head maid, the noble Rilda and the clever Adele, who comes from the borderlands, a notorious area. Aubrey's goal with this obvious choice is to force Tulia to pick Rilda, who is clearly her subordinate. Tulia thinks her reputation might suffer if she picks Adele, but suddenly a new system window appears, allowing her to view the candidates' files. She discovers Adele's shocking secret. She's the hidden younger sister of Luke, the Duke's assistant, and Luke feels immense guilt toward her. Knowing this secret, Tulia makes her decision. She ignores Aubrey's insistence on Rilda and announces she has chosen Adele to be her head maid. Tulia finds Adele skillful and kind, and no one dares object to her choice. She chose Adele because knowing her secret gives her leverage. With her hair finally neat thanks to Adele, Tulia enjoys a moment of peace. She thinks the wealth problem is solved, and now she must focus on improving her reputation. She realizes she can't reach rank A if everyone hates her, so she must enter the main story and meet the male leads. To do that, she needs the direct lineage necklace, which allows her freedom of movement, but she won't get it before her official debut. She decides the fastest way is to win the Grand Duke's favor and ask him for the necklace, but making jam is too slow, and Adele won't let her do hard work alone. She decides to exploit an upcoming event, the meeting regarding status planes. She remembers from the game that this meeting was about a failed horse ranch project run by Lilius. She plans to vote against the project to prevent a financial loss for the family, show off her abilities, and use the voting right she has as a member of the direct lineage. On the day of the meeting, Lilius expresses his confidence in winning. Since the other direct lineage members are absent, the Grand Duke enters and the meeting begins, reminding everyone of their duty to the family honor. As the voting starts, Tulia bursts into the hall, announcing her presence as a member of the direct lineage. The council chairman welcomes her, explaining that any direct lineage member can attend, while Lilius glares at her. One of the attendees mocks Lilius's anger, assuring him that Tulia's single vote won't change the outcome. Lilius agrees, believing Tulia can't do anything, and vows to make her regret showing up. The chairman officially opens the meeting, and when he asks supporters to raise their hands, he notices Tulia hasn't raised hers. Lilius asks if she opposes the project, and Tulia answers with a confident smile that she absolutely does. And Lilius asks why she opposes it, doubting she even knows where the planes are. Tulia coldly replies that the chairman already explained the location, and her uncle wasn't listening. Then she begins explaining her reasons. The plains are damp and unsuitable for horse breeding, and the costs will outweigh the profits. She remembers that the night before, she used her coins to raise her skill stat, which opened the skill title shop. She bought the Word Master and Walking Encyclopedia skills, giving her vast knowledge and persuasive power. Lilius gets angry and shouts that the Empress herself approved the project. But Tulia calmly replies that final authority belongs to the Emperor alone, which shocks Lilius. She accuses him of abandoning the Fraser family pride just to please the imperial family. Then she turns to her grandfather and declares that this project will bring shame to the family and officially votes against it. Lilius insists they have a 2-vote majority, but Tulia surprises him again. She announces that, according to family law, she will vote by proxy on behalf of her absent father and twin brothers, giving her 4 opposing votes. The chairman asks if there are any objections. The chairman announces that the result is 4 votes against and 2 in favor, so the project is rejected. Lilius collapses in shock, and the Grand Duke calls him out, scolding him for calling family law a trick. Tulia smiles, realizing her investment in skills was a success. After the meeting, the Grand Duke summons Tulia to a private room. He asks how she knew about proxy voting, and she tells him she read it in the family law book in the library. The Duke tests her with a series of questions about family history, and she answers them all easily thanks to her Walking Encyclopedia skill. The Duke expresses his surprise at her change, but scolds her for rebellion against her uncles. He decides to overlook her actions this time, but Tulia interrupts him, declaring she didn't act recklessly. She had to protect herself because she has no father or mother. She explains she did it to prove her worth and earn his recognition, hoping he would grant her the direct lineage necklace she needs for protection. The Duke understands her position, but tells her that what she did created a rift between family members and that giving her the necklace would be against the rules. Then he dismisses her from the room. As she leaves, a system window pops up saying the Duke's favorability toward her suddenly jumped from 30% to 50%. As a reward, she gets a special perk, a video titled The Missing Ring. In the video, she sees a glimpse of the Grand Duke's past when he was a young man, on his wedding day to Lycian Marbian. Their marriage was political, and it was rumored they hated each other. But the truth was completely different. Lycian was a beloved princess from her continent and was expected to become queen, but she was forced into a political marriage like other princesses. Tulia discovers through the video that her grandmother Lycian was an ambitious princess who fought for her throne, but lost in the end. Her marriage to her grandfather, Acis, was purely political. Acis wanted to secure his succession through her royal status, while she was forced to give up her dream. This unwanted marriage was painful for both. Lycian felt like a bird trapped in a cage and stopped eating out of grief and despair. One day, Lycian glimpsed the Status Plains from her window, which reminded her of her homeland, and she found it beautiful. Acis felt guilty toward her and suggested they visit the plains together, in an attempt to pull her out of her isolation. Although Acis seemed cold and reserved, he tried in his clumsy way to show concern, and over time Lycian started noticing his sincerity. She found happiness in tending flowers in the plains, and feelings of love slowly grew between them, even though they never explicitly expressed them. The couple had 4 children, and the distance between them seemed to shrink with each birth, but tragedy struck with the death of their eldest daughter, which broke Lycian's heart, and she died of grief shortly after. Even today, the Grand Duke remains sad over his wife, and the plains have become the embodiment of her memory for him. The video ends, and Tulia is shocked. Their love story was a secret the game never revealed. She now realizes the reason her grandfather's favorability rose wasn't just because of her vote, but because he felt grateful to her for protecting his precious wife's memory. She feels ashamed of her selfish motives and realizes she was wrong to focus only on scoring points. When she finds her grandfather still waiting for her, she sincerely apologizes, not just for her actions, but because she looked at the land her grandmother loved as just a business opportunity. She vows to protect that land with him, out of respect for her grandmother's memory, who was also part of her family. The Duke is touched by her words and asks if she did all this just to get the direct lineage necklace. Then he surprises her by giving her a chance to earn the necklace by passing a special test called the Academian, a difficult exam held only every 10 years for gifted heirs. Tulia agrees immediately, determined to succeed no matter what. Lelius is furious when he learns of the Duke's decision, seeing it as a violation of family rules, but the Duke scolds him harshly, confirming that Tulia's actions proved she is more than qualified to take the test, and warns him not to interfere again. Lelius leaves, vowing to make Tulia fail at any cost, as he has become drowned in debt after the failure of the Plains project, and can't stand to see her influence grow. On the day of the test, the external supervisor, Schultz Schmidt, arrives. He's the youngest and brightest researcher in the continent's history, a character Tulia knows from the game and considers a key to meeting the Crown Prince. Using the exam god skill she bought earlier, Tulia impresses everyone by achieving a perfect score in all subjects. Schultz is amazed by her genius and asks the Duke about the teacher who supervised her education, only to be shocked when the Duke tells him Tulia never had a private tutor at all. Schultz expresses his amazement at Tulia's result, confirming to the Grand Duke that it's the first time in the history of the White Tower a student has achieved a perfect score, especially without prior education. The Duke is convinced of Tulia's exceptional talent and decides to grant her the direct lineage necklace the next day, plus unlimited access to the private library. Most importantly, he asks Schultz to send a teacher from the White Tower to teach Tulia, a surprising move given the long political hostility between the Fraser family and the Tower. Schultz realizes this request represents a major shift in the Empire's balance of power. In her room, Tulia celebrates her easy success, achieved thanks to the exam god skill that cost her 500 coins. She plans to use her new freedom and necklace to meet the game's male leads and raise her rank, starting with Crown Prince Ferdinand. That night, her maid Adele visits and tells her something serious. She found Tedric's test paper hidden in Tulia's wardrobe. Adele explains she watched the maid Rilda after, suspecting her behavior, and saw her place the paper there. Tulia immediately realizes it's a plot by Lelius and his wife to frame her for cheating and ruin her reputation. But she refuses to give up and sets a counterplan. On the day of the ceremony, Tulia enters the hall amidst whispers about her amazing result. The Grand Duke begins the ceremony, but before he can grant her the necklace, Lelius interrupts, declaring the ceremony void. His wife Aubrey steps forward, claiming she has proof of Tulia's cheating, pointing out that her maid found paper identical to the exam paper in her wardrobe. She accuses Tulia of stealing Tedric's test paper to know the questions in advance. The Duke summons Tedric, who denies involvement. Lelius insists on searching Tulia's room to prove their claim. The Duke asks Tulia if she agrees to a search of her room, and confidently, she agrees immediately and invites anyone who doubts her innocence to accompany them. Lelius smiles, thinking Tulia has fallen into his trap. Shortly after, the assistant Luke returns with a bundle of papers found in Tulia's drawer. The furious Duke orders Lelius to read them aloud in front of everyone. Lelius grabs the paper and starts reading but is shocked. The paper wasn't an exam copy. It was a touching unsent letter from Tedric to his father, expressing his pain and longing for his father's recognition. Lelius collapses, seeing the letter is signed Tulria Fraser. It turns out Tulia anticipated their plan. The night before, she asked Adele for paper matching the exam paper, and instead of writing questions, she wrote that tragic letter. Her plan was to flip the situation. Instead of finding proof of cheating, they would find something that makes people sympathize with her, turning her from a suspected villainess into a hardworking, wronged child, which she succeeded in brilliantly. The attendee's opinion flips completely after reading the letter, looking at Tulia as a lonely, wronged girl, and at Lelius as a cruel uncle who doesn't deserve his status. The Grand Duke burns with rage at his son's vileness and orders his assistant Luke to resume the ceremony immediately. In a state of shock, Lelius realizes Tulia planned everything and defeated him, while he and his family leave the hall in shame. The ceremony is successfully completed, and Tulia finally gets the direct lineage necklace she fought for. As punishment, the maid Rilda is fired, and Tedric is moved to the same old warehouse Tulia used to live in. As for Lelius, he is left in a state of terror and anticipation for his yet undecided punishment. Tulia feels relieved after getting rid of her relative's threat, and suddenly, a system window informs her that her overall grade has been promoted to D+. Although progress is slow, she feels she's stepping away from her tragic fate bit by bit. Now that she has her freedom, she decides to move to the next stage, meeting the male leads, led by Crown Prince Ferdinand, as getting close to him grants the highest points in the game. Shortly after, Schultz Schmidt visits her unexpectedly and offers her a deal. Tulia agrees immediately, confident that a researcher like him wouldn't offer a bad deal, and sees it as a perfect opportunity to get close to the Crown Prince, who considers Schultz his closest person. Schultz presents her with a document written in a mysterious language she's never seen before. Thanks to the walking encyclopedia skill, Tulia manages to activate it and decode some words, shocking Schultz, who discovers she has a rare talent for reading this language. Schultz reveals to her that the document is his father's will, so Tulia agrees to translate it fully in exchange for one condition: that he arranges a visit for her to the White Tower, as she knows from the game that the Crown Prince frequents that place often. Days later, they head to the tower, but she's surprised to be accompanied by her grandfather, who insists on going with Schultz to meet the Tower Master, leaving Tulia to wander alone. As soon as she gets rid of them, she heads straight to the Imperial Garden inside the tower, the place where the heroine always met the Crown Prince. There, she hears the sound of an argument and witnesses a shocking scene. Empress Carmi slaps Crown Prince Ferdinand and leaves angrily. Tulia discovers that the relationship between them is much worse than she imagined. Tulia remembers the Crown Prince's tragic story. His mother, the former Empress Olivia, died after draining her divine power to protect him in her womb, following her shock at the Emperor's betrayal with her maid, Carmi. Consequently, Ferdinand was born suffering from divine power overflow, which causes him chronic pain, in addition to false rumors predicting his early death. Tulia hesitates to exploit someone suffering this much pain, but suddenly rain starts falling, and she knows Ferdinand is weak against rain. She overcomes her hesitation and decides to help him, approaching and offering him a handkerchief, suggesting he take cover from the rain. But he looks at her coldly and orders her to leave. Tulia decides to withdraw for now, realizing the Crown Prince wants to be alone. But before she leaves, she notices blood on his lip from the slap, so she offers him her simple handkerchief and insists he wipes it, then wishes him a quiet evening and departs. Ferdinand remains dazed, holding the handkerchief that looks like a worn-out piece of cloth, wondering about this strange girl. Due to his illness, he couldn't hear her last words clearly, so he wonders what she said and looks forward to their next meeting. On her way back, Tulia feels guilty for exploiting Ferdinand's tragic situation and decides to suspend her plan to get close to him for now. She sees it's better to focus on building her strength as his peer so she can truly help him in the future. While deep in thought, she is stopped by an arrogant voice to find herself face to face with the second prince, Dave, son of Empress Karmi, known in the game for his selfish and greedy personality. Dave addresses her with disdain, believing she's a commoner, and threatens her because she dared to talk back to him. Before the situation escalates, Empress Karmi appears and stops him, forcing him to apologize after revealing to him that this girl is Tulria Fraser, the Grand Duke's granddaughter. Dave apologizes reluctantly, but doesn't hesitate to insult her again because of her shabby clothes. At that moment, the Grand Duke suddenly appears. The Duke rebukes Prince Dave for his ignorance and failing to recognize his granddaughter, then directs his sharp words to the Empress, holding her responsible for her son's poor upbringing. Karmi tries to de-escalate, calling it a children's quarrel, indirectly threatening to tell the Emperor. But the Duke doesn't back down, calling her behavior vulgar, and reminding her that even the royal family cannot insult the Fraser family this way. He threatens that he will report it to the Emperor himself if they don't apologize properly. Under pressure from the Duke, the Empress forces her son to offer a formal apology to Tulia and the Duke. Then she offers her own apology and gifts Tulia an expensive hairpin as an attempt to end the situation. Tulia realizes it's a bribe, so she cleverly asks her grandfather if accepting it would bring shame to the family, and he tells her to do as she wishes. On the way back, the Duke asks Tulia about her impression of the Empress, and she describes her as cold and cruel. The Duke gives her a lesson on true nobility, emphasizing that it lies in integrity and ambition, not appearances, and asks her to be like her grandmother. Tulia mentioning her grandmother pleases him greatly, raising his favorability to over 90%. As a reward, Tulia gets 1,000 extra coins and a new feature called Lead Bank that allows her to deposit her coins to earn interest. Now, with her grandfather's support secured, Tulia turns her eyes to her next goal, her twin brothers, Rician and Leon, who recently returned to the palace. Tulia goes to receive them, but they meet her with clear coldness and hostility. Leon demands she stays out of his sight, and Tulia realizes winning them over will be a tough challenge. But she smiles confidently, knowing from the game exactly how to handle him. Tulia remembers from the game that the key to winning over her stubborn brother Leon is honesty and frankness, not flattery. So, she decides to confront him in his own style, telling him she will deal with him as he deserves. Tulia asks him with a challenging smile if he's happy now. She realizes she might look crazy to others. Then she turns to her other brother Rician and asks if he agrees to informal talk as well. Contrary to expectations, Rician agrees kindly, and even smiles at her for the first time, giving her some hope. Later in the evening, Tulia checks the game system and discovers that Lead Bank gives her interest on her deposited coins. As she plans her next steps, she prepares for what's coming. She expects her uncle Lelius will exploit the family dinner to ruin her reputation in front of her brothers, and will fill their heads with lies. Indeed, in the dining room, Lelius starts poisoning their thoughts, describing Tulia as impolite, and twisting the story of the council meeting to make it look like she exploited their rights with insolence and arrogance. But in the middle of his speech, her voice cuts them off, and Tulia bursts into the dining room. She coldly asks him why he didn't tell them the full story, and reveals before her brothers that the project was going to lead to selling the planes that were dear to their grandmother for profit. Lelius is shocked and confused, so she innocently answers she came for a family meal. Then Tulia addresses the twins, explaining she failed to communicate with them because they didn't reply to her letters, so she had to use their voices by proxy to protect the family honor. Leon erupts in anger, considering her words nonsense, but Rician surprises her by saying he replied to all her letters. Tulia is stunned. She didn't receive any letters. She immediately realizes that Lelius, as her guardian, was the one intercepting the letters. Tulia confronts her uncle with a sharp look, and Lelius tries to slip away, claiming he was only trying to fix the relationship between them. But Tulia coldly cuts him off and tells him she'll solve her problems with her brothers herself from now on. The next day, Tulia looks for Rician, feeling there's a hidden secret behind their relationship. She finds him in the library as expected, and there, she witnesses a shocking scene. She hears a librarian rebuking Rician harshly because of his stuttering. Tulia's anger flares up, so she intervenes and confronts the librarian, condemning his insult to the Grand Duke's grandson. When the employee tries to invent a lie, Tulia announces his immediate dismissal from the palace. After the incident, senior staff apologize to Raishin, who forgives them kindly as usual. Tulia gives her brother the book he was looking for, and he thanks her warmly for helping and defending him. Tulia asks her brother why he didn't defend himself, and he admits he sees himself as a frustrating person, but Tulia firmly rejects this talk and assures him no one should treat him that way. Rishin is touched by her words and tells her she resembles their mother, who was a strong and compassionate woman from the summer continent. While talking to him, Rekshin notices she's distracted. Tulia asks him about the letters, apologizing for her misunderstanding and thinking he was ignoring her. But Rekshin suddenly asks her why she burned all the letters, leaving her stunned as she understands her uncle didn't just steal them, but lied to him. Then Raishin reveals a stunning secret. He has memorized all 17 letters by heart. He confirms he can recite them to her fully, word for word. Raishin thanks her for standing by him, then tells her that if she had asked him to use his voice in the meeting, he would have agreed immediately. Tulia reflects on his kind words and feels something strange. She isn't even their real sister. She suddenly remembers a sentence from her main quest. No one loves you, except for one person, and wonders if Rissian is that person. She immediately decides to check his favorability level using 500 coins from her balance, but she's surprised by the result. His favorability gauge shows in light blue at 85%. She remembers the game system well. Red for hostility, green for other characters, and blue for male leads, while gold is reserved only for the completed ending. She realizes Raishin isn't the only person who already loves her, but he might be a potential lead. Raishin notices her distraction and asks if she's okay. He thinks she was disappointed because he only read the letters to her, and excitedly decides to rewrite one of the letters for her right now, embarrassing Tulia, who finds the situation awkward. At that moment, Leon suddenly appears, calling Tulia that thing and ordering Ritsian to get away from her. Tulia burns with rage but holds herself back for the sake of favorability points. But surprisingly, Ritsian defends her and tells Leon not to talk to her that way because she's their little sister. Leon mocks his words, then tears up the letter Ritsian was writing, calling it a useless act. Leon reveals the reason for his hatred, telling Ritsian about the rumors spreading that they don't share the same father, and asks him to stop the family farce. Ritsian calls him the worst ever and slaps him across the face. Tulia realizes her life is full of wounds caused by her family, and is sure Leon isn't the only person mentioned in the quest. Although she knows she must win him over to survive, she can't stand his cruel words anymore. She explodes in his face and asks him to stop hurting her, especially by her family. Leon is shocked by her reaction before she leaves him and departs. Later, Leon reveals to his brother the deep shock that caused his hatred. Their mother abandoned them and ran away with another man, carrying the infant Tulia in her arms. This incident left a deep scar in him. Rishin tries to calm him, confirming Tulia did nothing wrong, but Leon admits he can't love her. Meanwhile, Tulia regrets her outburst and decides to avoid Leon for now. But suddenly, a new sub-quest appears, forcing her to dance with the twins at the upcoming banquet. Tulia is fuming over the new quest. She can't imagine dancing with Leon after their latest fight. Meanwhile, at the Imperial Palace, Crown Prince Ferdinand is thinking about the handkerchief Tulia gave him. It actually eased his chronic pain, and even after the temple confirmed it wasn't enchanted, he realizes she might be the key to his cure. He decides he has to see her again. His assistant suggests attending the Grand Duke's birthday banquet, and Ferdinand agrees instantly, seeing it as the perfect chance. Tulia is totally distracted. She tried to dodge the dance quest, but the system wouldn't budge. And to make matters worse, Leon has been missing since their argument. Elsewhere, two of her relatives, Keynes and his brother, are plotting revenge against Leon for defending her. As the festival nears, Tulia gets desperate to find Leon, knowing that failing the quest means getting closer to her tragic end. Her maid Adele notices her exhaustion and offers to bring some sweets the Duke gifted her. Adele leaves to get them, and Tulia feels bad that her maid is so worried about her. She decides to join the festival and ask Richin for help. But suddenly, a new subquest pops up. Gather herbs from the forest, with a reward called the Leon Summoning Scroll. Despite how weird it is, she accepts. But as soon as she enters the forest and gathers the herbs, she finds herself surrounded by a pack of wild, vicious dogs. Just as she's about to be attacked, mysterious arrows fly in and save her at the last second. Her savior turns out to be Keynes, the cousin who was plotting against her. Keynes reveals he's the one who lured the beasts to her, and gives her a choice: beg for her life and join him, or die. Even though she's terrified, Tulia refuses to submit and tells him to go to hell. Keynes orders the dogs to attack, but before they reach her, Leon suddenly appears and pushes her out of harm's way. Tulia wonders why he's even there. Leon tells her he saw Keynes and his men following her suspiciously and decided to tail them. He scolds her for being reckless, and in the middle of the fight, Leon gets wounded while protecting her. He insists she runs and leaves him, but she refuses to abandon. Leon realizes he has to get her to safety first. Tulia attacks one of the wolves using an arrow she found, but another dog attacks her from behind, and Leon screams a warning. Before the dog can strike, it's violently blasted back. Out of the shadows appears Crown Prince Ferdinand, who tells them to step back and handles the rest of the beasts alone. Tulia is stunned to see him, as he wasn't supposed to be there, but she feels a sense of relief before passing out. Tulia wakes up later in her room to find an injured Leon by her side. He immediately starts mocking her, calling her pathetic for fainting the moment the Crown Prince showed up. Tulia asks about Ferdinand, and he tells her he's fine and resting in another room. Suddenly, a system window pops up informing her that Leon's favorability has passed 50%, leaving her totally confused. Before she can process it, another window grants her a reward, a playback of Leon's memory from that day. Leon tells her their grandfather and Rician were worried sick about her. Then, the memory starts. Through Leon's eyes, Tulia sees a story she never knew. She sees the two young brothers wondering why they didn't have pink hair like their mother and Tulia, and if that was why their mother abandoned them and only took Tulia. Tulia feels the betrayal, pain, and loneliness Leon suffered. Realizing his cruelty was just a mask for a deep wound of abandonment. The memory ends, and Leon surprises her with an apology. He admits he blamed her, even though she did nothing wrong. Having seen his deepest pain, Tulia tells him she completely understands. At that moment, his favorability jumps to 80%. Then he tells her Rician reported the incident to their grandfather, and the Grand Duke was so furious he sent Keynes and Tedric to the army for years as punishment. After that, Tulia tells Leon she's going to thank the Crown Prince. Leon warns her not to get too close to him, but she insists on going. She finds Ferdinand alone treating a wound on his hand and notices it's healing slowly, which is weird given his instant healing ability. She thanks him for saving her, and he directly asks why she came. She confirms she came to thank him, not just for saving her, but for handling her cousins. Ferdinand asks if there's anything else she wants to thank him for, and leans in, telling her he carried her all the way to the palace while she was unconscious. Tulia is mortified, and he tells her she now owes him 3 debts. Then he asks her to do something for him, and returns her handkerchief, but he doesn't want her to take it back. He reveals his chronic pain, eased since she gave it to him, but the effect faded over time. He asks her to constantly provide him with her personal items, anything she's used to help control his illness. Tulia realizes this is a golden opportunity to get close to the most important character in the game, so she agrees immediately. Ferdinand tells her he'll see her at the banquet and leaves. In the evening, the grand banquet begins. As Tulia admires the luxury of the hall, her maid Adele appears and apologizes profusely for not being there during the attack. Tulia reassures her she's fine, and Adele vows to always protect her. Now, Tulia focuses on her next mission, finishing the subquest and dancing with her brothers. Tulia feels her bad luck striking again. In the middle of the banquet, she finds her twin brothers, Leon and Rician, surrounded by girls on all sides, making it impossible to get near them. She remembers trying earlier, but being pushed aside rudely, even getting hostile glares from the same girls who used to be friendly. Realizing they only treat her this way because she's Tulia. Suddenly, Crown Prince Ferdinand arrives, sparking whispers about why he's there, especially given the known hostility between the imperial family and the Frasers. Everyone feels a terrifying aura around him, while Tulia notices the negative rumors about him are still spreading. Unexpectedly, Ferdinand spots her and calls her name, but before he can reach her, her brother Rician pushes through the crowd, expressing his joy at seeing her. After checking on her health, he surprises her by asking for a dance, admitting it was always his wish. Tulia agrees, but notices Ferdinand's sharp gaze fixed on them. When she asks Rician why, he's staring at the Crown Prince. Rician pretends it's nothing and suggests they talk elsewhere. As they start dancing, Tulia feels Rician is acting strange but ignores it. The banquet officially begins, and Rician asks her to dance again, even though she agrees. Her low stats make her a terrible dancer, and she loses focus, accidentally stepping on his foot. She apologizes deeply, but keeps making the same mistake over and over. Despite that, Rician stays kind and insists on trying again. Her other brother, Leon, loses his patience and angrily interrupts them, accusing Tulia of intentionally hurting Rician. Before she can defend herself, Leon pulls her by the hand and demands to swap partners. Rician agrees, calling Tulia his cute little sister. Thanks to this interaction, her Lady of the Banquet subquest is successfully completed. For a moment, Tulia feels true happiness as if she's finally part of this family, taking another step in her impossible mission. As a reward, she gets 2,000 coins and a mysterious perk called Mistress of Life, while a mysterious figure watches her from afar. Her struggle continues while dancing with Leon, who accuses her of stepping on his foot harder than she did with Rishan. In the middle of their bickering, Ferdinand's calm voice intervenes, pointing out that Leon is the one failing to lead her properly. The Crown Prince steps forward and offers to take the lead, ignoring Leon's protests and giving a formal dance invitation to a stunned Tulia. Tulia fears a repeat of the dance disaster, but Ferdinand reassures her she won't step on his foot. While dancing, he thanks her and reveals a shocking secret. Her very existence is the cure for his condition, and being near her definitely eases his symptoms. He asks her to maintain a close relationship with him, and Tulia agrees instantly, realizing this is an irreplaceable chance. In return, Ferdinand gives her vital advice, warning her about Empress Carmi, who has noticed her, and confirming that she's become an important person to him now. After the banquet ends, Tulia is overjoyed to get her coins back, bringing her balance to over 2,800 coins. But her peace didn't last long, as the system reveals the details of the Mistress of Life perk. It's a one-time ability to resurrect a dead male lead. This terrifies her because in the original game, none of the male leads ever died, making her wonder why such a reward exists and giving her a sudden chill. The next day, Tulia meets her grandfather, who offers a sincere apology for his past neglect and failure to protect her, and she forgives him immediately, while her grandfather suggests inviting her father for her birthday. Tulia rejects the idea in a panic. At that moment, a messenger arrives with an urgent letter, bearing the imperial seal. It's an invitation from the Empress for a tea party, and her grandfather offers to help her reject it, sensing the hidden motives behind it. The grandfather asks Tulia about her decision regarding the Empress's invitation, but she's surprised by a sudden quest window. The system gives her a choice: accept the invitation or have her stats completely reset. So she realizes she has no choice and decides to face it and accept. Days later, Tulia arrives at the Imperial Palace, realizing the Empress summoned her because she caught her attention during their previous meeting. Expecting to be insulted or fall into some trap, a maid receives her and leads her to the Palace of Protection, where she's told to wait for an entire hour. Realizing this is a classic intimidation tactic, while waiting, she suddenly hears a loud thud. She peeks to see a man lying on the ground, while others berate him harshly, calling him a disgrace and a descendant of the kingdom of Sursen. Tulia realizes the humiliated man is Benjamin, one of the male leads in the game, an ambitious prince born to a humble concubine who suffered from a deep inferiority complex that drove him to kill his brothers and take the throne. The attackers continue mocking Benjamin, telling him his invitation to the tea party was just a protocol and reminding him of his mother's humble lineage. After they leave, Tulia feels intense anger at their cruelty. Tulia rushes to help Benjamin and discovers his injuries are both old and new, revealing long-term abuse. Unable to ignore the situation, she uses her coins to level up her skills and provides him with first aid. Benjamin wakes up suddenly, panics, and apologizes for bothering her. Tulia explains he collapsed and there was no time to call a doctor. Benjamin thanks her but feels ashamed that she witnessed his humiliation, so she insists there's no need to apologize. She urges him to rest and skip the tea party, and he bitterly remarks that he's already forgotten what it means to be called prince. A maid arrives to announce the start of the party, so Benjamin decides to stay and rest, thanking her and calling her Lady Tulia, which surprises her because he knows her name. Tulia leaves worried about him, asks the maid to keep an eye on him, and wonders how he knew her identity. In the party hall, Empress Carmi enters and goes straight to Tulia, expressing her happiness that she accepted the invitation. Despite her internal disgust, Tulia plays along with praise, which impresses the Empress and sparks whispers among the attendees about their sudden relationship. Once Tulia decides it's time to leave, the Empress stops her, asking to speak with her in private. Meanwhile, Crown Prince Ferdinand is urged to leave the palace for the battlefront by order of the angry emperor. It turns out the second prince, Dave, is complaining to his mother, the Empress, about her insistence on meeting Tulia, whom he describes with the worst insults. Ferdinand suddenly appears and scolds him for his rude talk about a lady from the Fraser family. But Dave rejects his advice and mocks his brother's illness, so Ferdinand challenges him to a duel. Back to Tulia, the Empress asks her opinion of her son Dave and hints that they seem suitable for each other, indirectly suggesting a marriage between them. Tulia immediately realizes this is a plot to link her family to the Empress and expand her influence, and refuses to be a tool in her hand. While she's in a bind, a servant rushes into the hall, announcing a serious incident. Prince Dave has been severely injured during his duel with the Crown Prince. The Empress rushes to find her injured son and demands an immediate explanation from Ferdinand. The Crown Prince calmly tells her that Dave was the one who requested the duel, and after failing to hit him, accused him of cheating, which led him to teach him a lesson. After Crown Prince Ferdinand ends the duel, he reveals that Dave was the one who attacked him with a real sword and failed, making Tulia shocked by his stupidity. But Empress Karmi refuses to believe the story and accuses the Crown Prince of fabricating lies to ruin her son's reputation. She orders the guards to summon the royal physician immediately. While the attendees whisper about how terrifying the Crown Prince is, believing his illness is the cause of his cruelty. Tulia is upset that no one believes Ferdinand, realizing everyone's fear of the Empress has blinded them. Even though she can't help, she decides to show him that someone trusts him. She steps toward him and offers to call a doctor, but he reminds her that his illness gives him the ability to heal fast. Tulia feels embarrassed for forgetting and apologizes, citing her intense worry for him. Ferdinand offers to escort her to her carriage since the tea party has been cancelled. As they leave, Tulia asks the real reason he accepted the duel. It turns out Dave had spoken rudely about her earlier, so Ferdinand explains he was giving him a brotherly lesson. Tulia assures him she completely believes him, so he approaches her and touches her hair, claiming he's fulfilling their contract to ease any potential headache. He thanks her and hopes they meet in better circumstances. On her way back, Ferdinand stops her again to renew his warning about the Empress and insists she rejects any future invitation from her no matter what. As she leaves, she spots Benjamin in the garden and calls out to him. Benjamin tells her he was looking for her to officially offer his thanks before leaving. Tulia is surprised by his boldness and thinks how all the villainous characters in the novel seem much kinder in reality. She tells Benjamin she couldn't ignore him because he reminded her of herself, sharing her previous struggle with bullying and encouraging him to stay strong. After he says goodbye, Tulia decides to take measures to protect him and heads to an old tavern where she orders a strange menu. The owner leads her to a secret room where she meets the head of the Information Guild, Ramos. Tulia reveals her true identity, shocking Ramos, then offers a deal. She asks to monitor Benjamin for 3 years and report on his status, intervening only to save him from death. She adds a strict condition. If Benjamin dies, the guild will pay a fine equal to 100 times the contract value. In exchange, Tulia offers investment information worth half her family's fortune and successfully seals the deal. Meanwhile, Benjamin returns to his sick mother, describes his meeting with Tulia to her, and wishes she would wake from her coma. Suddenly, his mother wakes up, apologizes for her weakness, then transfers the rest of her life force to him before drawing her last breath in his arms. After returning to the palace, Tulia receives a notification of successfully completing the Empress's mission and wonders why the mission was so easy compared to its severe penalty. As a reward, she gets a new perk called Child's Talent Pearl Tears, but is surprised that the perk description doesn't show up, raising her suspicions about a system glitch. Suddenly, the game system malfunctions and displays repeated error messages before shutting down completely, leaving Tulia in a panic. She was relying on the system to survive, and now that it's down, she feels scared and lonely. In her confusion, her twin brothers, Leon and Rician, appear, worried about her after seeing her pale face. Tulia claims she just had a nightmare, so Rician offers to walk her to her room, but Leon insists on taking care of it himself. Then the two surprise her by staying in her room to guard her. Leon explains they fear she'll wander the palace again and get scolded by their grandfather, who has been extremely worried about her since the banquet incident. It turns out the grandfather, after the incident, decided to tighten protection on Tulia and ordered the twins to take turns guarding her at night. Tulia feels grateful for their concern and starts feeling comfortable for the first time. While they're sitting, Rician asks about the nature of her nightmare. In an attempt to soothe her, he reveals another secret. Rician admits he also suffers from recurring nightmares since that day and sincerely apologizes to her, believing her nightmares are linked to the same incident. Tulia is shocked and confused, realizing there's a past she doesn't know and that Rician's kindness toward her might stem from his guilt. Rician reassures her that's not the case, but he remains worried. It turns out Rician feels he's failing as an older brother, so the twins agree to take better care of her from now on, emphasizing that their father is the one who should feel guilty for neglecting her. Meanwhile, on the northern front, Tulia's father, Marquis Astor Fraser, returns from a fierce battle. His assistant Max informs him his suspicions were right. All the money and gifts he was sending to his daughter were going to the palace of his uncle Lelius, and all the letters he received were forged. Aster burns with rage and decides to return to the ducal palace immediately. A few days later, while Tulia is still suffering from the system's absence and trying to uncover the mystery of her past herself, she hears a loud screaming in the palace. Her Aunt Aubrey bursts into her room, blaming her for all her family's misfortunes and demanding financial compensation. Tulia replies coldly, reminding her that she spent 3 years in the same trash warehouse. Aubrey gets angry and tries to slap her, but Tulia threatens to expose the matter to her grandfather. Before she can slap her, a mysterious man stops her. Aster Fraser suddenly appears. Tulia's father, who was supposed to be in the north, he asks Tulia how she is, noticing she looks pale and unhappy, leaving her confused as she didn't expect this concern from him. Marquis Aster Fraser, Tulia's father, confronts his uncle's wife Aubrey after his sudden return. Aster notices Aubrey is wearing jewelry and clothes he had sent to his daughter, so he asks why she's wearing Tulia's gifts. Tulia is shocked, realizing her father was sending her gifts all along. Aster throws a bunch of letters in front of Aubrey, revealing they are forged letters she and her husband Lelius had been sending him for years, asking for money and supplies, claiming they were for his daughter. Tulia reads one of the letters and discovers it's a despicable trick by her uncle, claiming Tulia suffers from psychological trauma and gets seizures just from seeing her father's picture, advising him not to visit for her safety. Tulia burns with rage, while Aubrey tries to lie, claiming Tulia received everything and shared the surplus with them. Aster turns to Tulia and asks her directly if she received anything from him, and she denies it. Aster reveals he was aware of their embezzlement of support funds and orders Lelius to be brought immediately. At that moment, the Grand Duke appears, having heard everything, and expresses his deep disappointment in his family's actions. The Duke orders Lelius to be brought for questioning and to punish everyone involved, and forces Aubrey to return everything she stole from Tulia. After the situation is handled, Aster rebukes his daughter Tulia, wondering why she didn't act or send him a letter to tell him about her suffering. His words lead to an explosion of Tulia's suppressed feelings, so she confronts him that he didn't care about her either, telling him the details of her miserable life from freezing in hunger to the insults of servants, her begging her grandfather for her life, and how she had to pretend she was fine so her brothers wouldn't hate her. She announces she doesn't want to talk to anyone and leaves. Tulia finds herself back in the old warehouse she used to live in and feels a strange comfort there. Her father Aster follows her, who sincerely apologizes, admitting he didn't know how bad the place was. He explains he believed Lelius's lies that he shouldn't visit her out of fear for her health. Then he presents her with her late mother's diary, which she wrote while pregnant with Tulia. The diary is full of love and anticipation for her birth, and reveals how her father and brothers were waiting for her eagerly. Tulia explodes at her father again, wondering if he thinks a diary can erase years of neglect and suffering, and accuses him of preferring his horse over her. This accusation shakes Aster deeply, and he swears to her that if he had to choose between his life and hers, he would choose her without hesitation. Then he remembers his promise to his late wife on her deathbed, to protect Tulia and make her the happiest girl in the world. He assures her he hasn't forgotten his promise and won't lose someone precious again. Tulia asks him if he still loves her mother, and he answers yes, and that he'll keep loving her even if it costs him his life. These words were the proof Tulia needed, feeling it was an acknowledgement of her existence as their daughter. Suddenly, the system is back online, revealing that the child's talent, Pearl Tears, perk she got, is what allowed her to release her suppressed feelings. She tells her father she doesn't want to be alone again, so he promises to protect her always. The system offers her to check her father's favorability level, and she realizes with certainty that he is the only person who loves her mentioned in the main quest. Tulia discovers a stunning fact. The system confirms that the only person who has loved her from the beginning is her father, Aster Fraser, and that his maximum love is the reason she got 1,000 coins at the start of her mission. Tulia realizes the only person was her father, and that his affection was at its peak from the start. While she's in the old warehouse, her grandfather, father, and twin brothers catch up to her, having followed her trail worried about her. They all apologize bitterly for their past neglect, as the Grand Duke tells them of his anger at his own ignorance, while Rician and Leon apologize for their cruelty and vow to protect her. Tulia tells them she can't forgive easily, but she gives them one chance, warning them she will leave the family forever if she's neglected again. They all accept her condition, and Rician vows his life on it, While her grandfather and father argue about who will take her back to the palace, Aster steps in, confirming it's his job. Rishon notices the dilapidated place his sister lived in, feeling guilty and admitting he suffers from a recurring nightmare. Tulia asks him about the nightmare, and he tells her it still haunts him. He reveals to her that in his dream, he finds Leon unconscious and finds himself trying to hurt Tulia, admitting he wasn't in his right mind during that mysterious incident. Before he finishes, her father interrupts, but Tulia insists on staying to gather her thoughts. So everyone decides to spend the night with her in the warehouse to protect her, vowing not to leave her alone again. Tulia agrees to them staying over that night. Later, Tulia realizes that the Pearl Tears ability is what allowed her to release her feelings, and that Rissian's nightmare hides a deeper secret. The next day, her father asks her about her birthday gift and promises to do anything for her. So she asks to go on a picnic with them all, explaining she wants to go with both her grandfather and father, which touches them deeply. The Grand Duke agrees, but insists on punishing the guilty first. He summons Viscount Lucius and his wife, who beg him, but Aster threatens them with a sword. Then the Duke strips him of his title and property, announcing that everything will be returned to Tulia. As a result, her wealth stat skyrockets. Days later, Tulia goes with her father and grandfather on a picnic to the Status Plains, which surprises the servants and greatly improves her reputation. The system informs her she has reached rank C- and got 1,000 coins as a reward. Tulia takes the chance to ask her grandfather for another gift, asking for land that seems useless near the borders of Philos, justifying it as land of special importance, which surprises the Duke, who heard disturbing rumors about it. Tulia explains her plan lies in exploiting the barren land of Philos for agriculture, a secret only known to those who played the game, where massive wealth can be achieved, and the favor of the imperial family won using a hidden item in that land. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Sursen, Prince Benjamin stands sadly at his mother's grave to have a mysterious servant named Trini appear before him, sent by his mother to protect him before her death. Benjamin is deeply moved and vows he will become stronger and seize the kingdom's throne. After that, Tulia heads to Philos, accompanied by 2 guards, her father and grandfather, tasked with protecting her. Her father's chief assistant, Max, and the Knight Grands. The 2 guards express their concern about the dangerous rumors of heretics appearing in that area, but Tulia reassures them confidently. Upon arriving at a dangerous cave full of traps, Tulia uses her prior game knowledge to bypass them easily, solving the puzzles the system presents to determine the safe path, much to her companion's amazement. But, unexpectedly, the system glitches and gives a wrong answer, leading to the activation of a trap that almost killed Grands if not for Max's last-second intervention. Tulia realizes the situation has become extremely dangerous, but her companions insist on protecting her and getting her to her destination. In the depths of the cave, everyone is surprised to see piles of commoners' corpses. Then Tulia finds the item she's looking for, rainbow fertilizer, floating in the air instead of being a quest reward. Before they can leave, they are attacked by a group of heretics, who intended to use her as a sacrifice to their god, Animus, to get the fertilizer. Tulia is shocked to discover these heretics know about the game item. A fierce fight breaks out, and in the middle of the chaos, an emergency mission appears for the system. Survive on the altar for 5 minutes. The reward is the fertilizer, and the penalty for failure is the death of one of her team members. Tulia rushes to the altar and succeeds in holding out while her guards fight fiercely. In the final seconds before the protective barrier broke, the heretic leader attacks Max, but the barrier activates just in time and saves him. Tulia succeeds in the mission and gets the fertilizer. As the heretics prepare for another attack, Crown Prince Ferdinand suddenly appears, announcing his arrival to save the day. Crown Prince Ferdinand arrives at the right moment and checks on Tulia's safety. They decide to leave the cave immediately before the heretics return. On their way out, Tulia feels tired, so the Crown Prince supports her. But suddenly, a new hidden mission appears. Master of Destiny, save Klaus Rashuba. Tulia realizes Klaus is the hidden male lead in the game, a prince from another kingdom whom the original Tulia was supposed to imprison and cause his suffering. Although the mission wasn't in her plans, she decides to use the Mistress of Life perk she got earlier to resurrect him, and accepts the mission. Tulia follows the instructions to where Klaus is, who returns to life before their eyes. The mission is successfully completed, but Klaus wakes up in a hostile state and grabs Tulia, calling her lowly. Ferdinand intervenes and threatens him to stop, but Klaus refuses and insists that Tulia is his. Before Tulia can understand the situation, she finds herself in his arms. Suddenly, a system window pops up telling her she has acquired the wolf obedience skill, a skill that forces Klaus to obey her blindly and causes him separation anxiety if she moves away from him. much to his intense rage. After returning to the palace, they find themselves in an awkward situation inside a narrow carriage, where Klaus cannot pull away from Tulia. The crown prince explains to Klaus that what happened was just an accident, and they will look for a cure for this condition. Klaus reluctantly agrees, while the crown prince tries to calm the situation. Meanwhile, Tulia thinks about Klaus's lie about why he was in the cave, realizing he did it to protect her from suspicion because he knows the crown prince was there. Arriving at the ducal palace, her father is waiting for her with great concern. Aster thanks the crown prince for saving his daughter and invites him for a formal visit, and the crown prince gladly accepts. While Ferdinand says goodbye to Tulia, she returns to the palace to find Klaus still waiting for her, announcing he'll stay with her for a while. Raishin remembers his childhood and how his mother would sometimes sneak out of the palace, so he would wait for her anxiously until she returned to hug her. But she always told him her destination was a secret. In the present, when Luke, the Duke's assistant, asks him about his request to monitor Tulia, Rishin insists on knowing every detail of her movements. Later, he asks Tulia about her trip to Philos, and she answers with the same word their mother used to say, secret. Rishin smiles and renews his request to Luke to watch Tulia closely, determined not to lose her again. Meanwhile, Klaus is held bound in one of the palace rooms, and Leon confronts him with intense anger for daring to hug his sister in front of the whole family. The twins explain that their hands are tied because their grandfather and father are in a state of intense rage, and have ordered him completely isolated from Tulia. When they tell him this, isolation might last for a week, Klaus loses his mind and tries to escape, demanding to see her immediately. In the middle of this chaos, Adele arrives with a package for Tulia, and she discovers it's from the guild leader Ramos, who succeeded in finding Bactol seeds, the second item she needed. Now that she has all the materials, she decides to head immediately to the land of Philos to start her agricultural project. Later, the grandfather discusses with Klaus and Tulia the matter of the complicated wolf obedience spell, and confirms to him that the only way to break it is by using his kingdom's national treasure. Klaus explains that separating from Tulia might lead to his death, so the grandfather refuses to let him stay by her side to preserve her reputation. To solve this problem, Klaus uses his ability to transform into the form of a cute little wolf and asks the grandfather mockingly if he's still worried now. The family reluctantly agrees for Klaus to stay in the palace in this form. After a while, on the land of Philos, Tulia starts her agricultural project with Klaus's help in his new form. Despite his resentment at being treated as a pet, he was surprisingly obedient. All family members joined them to help in this project, working all together with diligence and activity. Tulia looks at this scene and feels a deep peace, hoping all her coming days continue this way, realizing she won't be alone anymore, and that she'll fight to keep this happiness